Hey guys, it's Alexis, aka The Soft Reader, and I'm here today to do another Favorites Friday video. If you missed my Favorite Friday video from last week, it was basically me talking about my favorite animes, and I'll link that either in the annotations or down below if you're interested to check it out. Favorites Friday is basically just a thing I do every Friday where I talk about a different topic, my favorites within that topic. Typically they're not book related purely because I spend 2 other days out of the week talking about books. My topic for this Favorites Friday is my favorite bands. So of course I have to start off by mentioning a couple of things. First of all, I honestly could make a list of like 50 of my favorite bands. So narrowing it down to these couple were hard. I kind of just picked bands that like I am always in the mood for. That like if a song of theirs came on I wouldn't skip it. That kind of thing. Also to bands I'm including to be any group that's more than 2 people. So 2 people or more. So obviously I'm not going to include solo artists in this. I'll actually probably do a whole nother video just on my favorite solo artists. Also along that, I'm not going to include Panic at the Disco in bands. I'm going to include them as a solo artist because currently, let's be honest, Brendan Urie is the entire band now. And even when there were 4 of them, the only one I cared about was Brendan Urie. So I'm going to go ahead and save Panic at the Disco for my favorite solo artist because really it's just Brendan Urie that I'm in love with. So I'll just say Brendan Urie is a solo artist I love. But every other band that I'm going to mention, they're all bands of multiple people with the exception of one, which is a duo, which is probably the one on this list that's very different from every other musical artist I'm going to mention. And also too, I want to mention that, I mean, I think a lot of people, music is a very important thing to them. In my family, music is like a way we communicate with each other. My dad and my brother are both musicians, and I mean like my dad played music professionally for a long time, taught himself how to play piano and guitar, and then continued to make a living off of that for years. And so like we're kind of a big musical family, and even though I can't play any instruments, you know, I still did musical theater, family fun sessions were us playing rock band together, so music in my family is kind of a big deal, so music is kind of a big thing in my family, which is why I have so many artists that I consider to be my favorites because, you know, I'll listen to them with my dad. But again, these are the bands that I kind of am always in the mood for, or there's a song, you know, by them, and usually I'll listen to albums start to finish. So yeah, I'll just go ahead and get into it. The first band I'm going to mention is a really, really big band, and it's kind of the big band in our family, and that is, of course, the Beatles. The Beatles are probably arguably my dad's favorite band, and I only say that because my dad has an entire room in our house dedicated to Beatles stuff. My dad could probably win Beatles Jeopardy! One summer he made me watch the Beatles anthology with him, which is fine. I find musical history very interesting. But like, it's like a requirement in our family to be a fan of the Beatles. Whoever I eventually marry in life will probably also have to be a fan of the Beatles. So they're a huge, huge thing in our family, and so, you know, part of that is just that I really love them because I've listened to them so much and I've learned so much about them through my dad, and I know that a lot of people don't really like the Beatles. A lot of people think the Beatles are really overrated, or a lot of people just know individual things about each members of the Beatles and they don't like the band as a whole for that, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I mean, the Beatles have so many songs and they went through so many evolutions as a band that there's so much content there and so much history there that I really do think that there's like a Beatles era for everyone. My favorite Beatles album without a doubt is Rubber Soul. It's my favorite start to finish. I love it so much. But again, there's so many Beatles songs that to try and narrow down a favorite song by them is really difficult. Some of my favorite songs for sure are definitely A Day in the Life, Sgt. Pepper, Michelle, Rubber Soul, While My Guitar Gently Weeps. I mean, Eleanor Rigby sounds so overrated to say that's one of your favorites, but genuinely, I just think that there's so many good parts of that song. I mean, the entirety of the Abbey Road album is fantastic. So, I mean, again, that's one of the bands that is very difficult for me to try to really narrow down a favorite song by them, because even some of their covers I still really love. So, yeah. But my favorite album, start to finish, is Rubber Soul. So that's the one that I recommend the most, in my opinion. The next band I'm going to mention, it only has 2 albums out, and then they've done a couple of songs here and there for different soundtracks, but I fell in love with the first album when I heard it. I re-fell in love with the band when I heard their second album, and that is Of Monsters and Men. Of Monsters and Men, you probably have heard some of their songs here and there, either Little Talks or Silhouettes, the song that they did for the Hunger Games or the Catching Fire soundtrack. But Of Monsters and Men is another one of those bands that I have a hard time picking a favorite song from, because even though they have less than 50 songs to their name, I really don't have a single one that I dislike. Like, when I listen to Of Monsters and Men, either album that they have, I usually listen to it start to finish. Like, I don't skip a song. I really enjoy all of them. I think they're all really good in their own merits. Like, I was looking at my Spotify playlist trying to decide what my favorite song off of their second album, Beneath the Skin, which is the album I do prefer, and I honestly can't choose a favorite. Typically, my personal tastes lean more towards ballads. I like more crooning songs rather than, upbeat and happier songs. It's just my personal taste. I think both have their time and their place, obviously, but I typically lean more towards ballads. So, I mean, I lean more towards saying that, like, Eye of the Storm off of their second album is my favorite, but I really, really like Wolves Without Teeth, Human, Hunger. Really, I mean, that whole album, in my opinion, is really, really, really fantastic. The next band I'm going to mention is a band that I've been lucky enough to see in person, and they were fantastic, and that is Broods. And Broods is a brother-sister duo from New Zealand. And I love Broods. Their first song I ever heard by them was Bridges, which was their debut single, and that's still, to this day, is still one of my favorite songs by them, just because I think it's so good. But Broods kind of pairs Georgia, the sister, her really powerful vocals, with Caleb, the brother, his talent with keyboards. So they kind of do have almost like an electronic sound to them, but they're still pretty alternative. Same with Of Monsters and Men. Their second album, Conscious, is my favorite, just because start to finish, there's really not a song on there I really dislike. But my favorite song by Broods is off of their first album, and it's Four Walls, which is a ballad they do. So again, proving that ballads typically lean more towards my taste. But I really, really like Four Walls. Off their second album, I would recommend the title song, Conscious, Your Home, and I mean, just any of them. I really, really love that album, and I mean, I got to see them perform pretty much the entirety of that album live last August, and it was awesome. They put on such an amazing show, and yeah, if you haven't heard of Broods, or if you've only heard one song by them and you're looking to check out more, I definitely recommend it. The next band I'm going to mention is one that is kind of similar to Broods, and that is Churches. And of course, Churches is a band from the United Kingdom, I believe. And I love the lead singer. I follow her on all of the social media sites, and she's fantastic. I absolutely love her social media presence, but that's not important. But Churches is kind of the same, where it's still kind of an alternative type, but it kind of has like an electric, almost like synth background to it. Also similarly to Broods, their second album is the one I prefer, which I'll try to leave a cover of all of the albums I'm talking about somewhere on the screen, but I prefer their second album just because, I mean, on that there's only like 1 or 2 songs I don't like, but there's a lot of the songs from their first album that, like, I could take or leave. And off of their second album, Every Open Eye, my 2 favorite songs are Make Them Gold and Clearest Blue. Those are kind of the 2 that, like, when they come on, when I'm listening to the album, you know, I'll turn it up really loud and I kind of really jam out to them. But yeah, I mean, Churches is, I mean, I would still argue are considered an alternative band, but they do kind of have that electronic beat. But yeah, I mean, if that is something you're interested in, obviously it's something I'm interested in, then I would definitely recommend them to you guys. The next band I'm going to mention is the one that is kind of very, very different from every other band on this list, and it's the one that's actually a duo, and that is going to be Hall & Oates. And many of you either aren't going to know who Hall & Oates are, or you're going to be like, what? So Hall & Oates is a duo from the 70s and 80s, comprised of Daryl Hall and John Oates. You've probably heard some of their songs like Private Eye, Rich Girl. They have like a 70s, you know, keyboard synth kind of sound to them. My favorite song from them, hands down, is probably She's Gone, just because I love so many of the vocal runs in that song are just so good. But yeah, I mean, Hall & Oates is one of those groups that they have a song for every feeling. So not necessarily in terms of lyrics, but like the song itself, like listening to it, like they have a song that fits like every occasion to me. So that's part of the reason why I like them, is because, you know, sometimes when I'm feeling sad or if I'm feeling really upbeat, I'll know the perfect Hall & Oates song to go to listen to. So I guess that's part of the reason why I grew to love them so much. Also, my brother is a pretty big Hall & Oates fan too, so we kind of bond a little over our mutual love for Hall & Oates. But if you're kind of looking for a duo or a group from the 70s, 80s to get into, definitely recommend Hall & Oates. They're a lot of fun to listen to, and let's be honest, Daryl Hall has an amazing voice, still does, if you ever get a chance to watch his TV show that he has where he sings music with other musicians. He still has a very, very, very nice voice. The next band I'm going to mention is probably the one that I've been a fan of the longest, and that's because I've been a fan of this band since their second album, I want to say, which I don't even know what year that was, but I know it was when I was still living in Louisiana, which has been over 10 years. Actually, it's been going on 12 years, so it's definitely been a long time. It's also a band I've been lucky enough to see live, and they put on a show, let me tell you, and that is Fall Out Boy. Like, at the time of my life when I was really, really into, like, alternative and that kind of stuff, I mean, Fall Out Boy is a group I was really into, and even when I got into more heavy metal at that time in my life, Fall Out Boy was still a band I still listened to, and so now, even now, I mean, I just saw Fall Out Boy last year, actually last April, so I mean, that shows you that I still am interested enough in them that I paid money to see them live. Had a great time, by the way. Great show. But I still really love Fall Out Boy. Fall Out Boy is another one of those bands that I have a hard time choosing a favorite song from. I think every album of theirs has its cluster of songs that are really good. From Under the Cork Tree is the first album I ever listened to by them, so a part of that album is really sentimental to me because that's the album that got me into Fall Out Boy. But I will say I really, really like American Beauty, American Psycho. I know a lot of people, there's like this weird idea that like a band's most recent album can't be your favorite, which is stupid to me, by the way. But I know a lot of Fall Out Boy fans that I know don't consider that their best album, but I think that there's so many good songs on that album. There's so many good songs off of Save Rock and Roll. Fully Ado is probably one of my favorite albums too, just because there's so many good songs on that one. But yeah, I mean, I could probably go through every Fall Out Boy album and list you my favorite song off of it, probably, but that would probably take us an extra 5 to 10 minutes that we don't have, so I'm gonna go ahead and move on. The next band I'm gonna mention is another classic rock one that I fall in love with, partially because of my dad, because of how much he really likes this band, and that is the Eagles. The Eagles also just fit my taste in music where I am in my life now. I really like a lot of more soft rock, a lot of more folk rock, a lot of, you know, indie singer-songwriter stuff. That kind of fits my taste more, and that's kind of what the Eagles are. I mean, with the exception of several songs, obviously, you know, Hotel California has like a, you know, a epic guitar solo. Life in the Fast Lane is a very upbeat song. Already Gone's a very upbeat song. But a lot of their songs, too, are very just relaxed. They kind of just have a good melody to them, and that's one of the things that really drew me to the Eagles. Also too, the lead singer, Glenn Frey, has an amazing voice. May he rest in peace. He was a very, very talented singer as well. The Eagles, it's a toss-up my favorite song between either Lying Eyes or New Kid in Town. Those are the two that I'm always going back to jamming out to. Like right now I have the beat for New Kid in Town stuck in my head. But yeah, I mean, those are the two that I kind of always go back to, but I will admit that I'm a huge, huge fan of Desperado just because of how, you know, crooning of a song that is. So, alright guys, so this is the final band I'm gonna mention, and I specifically saved this band for last because this is the band I do consider to be my favorite band. This is kind of my go-to band. I've also been lucky enough to see them live, and it was absolutely amazing. Also, too, you should know that if any of you are Hamilton fans, Lin-Manuel Miranda is also a fan of this group, and the group that I'm talking about is actually the Decemberists. So the Decemberists are a group based out of Seattle. That's where they're originally from anyway. And they're so talented, and they've put out I can't remember if it's 6 or 7 albums, I don't remember. This past year, their album, The Crane Wife, recently celebrated its 10th anniversary, so I got this amazing LP set that comes with 5 vinyl records, and a Blu-ray concert DVD, and it also comes with a little booklet with information about the band, as well as a foreword by Lin-Manuel Miranda himself, where he talks about his love for this album. I'm not sponsored or anything. I don't even think you can buy this anymore. I'm just trying to explain that this is my favorite band and I love them. Also, I needed something to hold up, so I'm holding this up. But the Decemberists are very much kind of folk, kind of indie singer-songwriter. They're not for everyone. I'll start off by saying that. Over the years that I've been into them, because I've been into them, I first discovered them when I was in high school, probably about 5 or 6 years ago. And I've tried to get friends and my brother into them, and none of them really liked the sound. The singer, Colin Malloy, has a very distinct sound that a lot of people think is creepy. That's literally the word I've heard from 2 different people where they're like, this guy sounds creepy. But I love his voice. His voice always sounds so rhythmic and I guess kind of haunting in a way, but that's something I really, really like. And so my favorite album, objectively, I can admit that The Crane Wife is probably their best album, but if I had to choose a favorite album, it probably would be their most recent album, What a Terrible World, What a Beautiful World. And that's mostly because that album had just come out when I saw them live a couple years ago. So when I saw them live, most of the songs they performed were from that album, so it made me appreciate so many of the songs off of that album so much more. Just getting to see Colin Malloy stand with a guitar and play Carolina Low, and getting them just to see them have so much fun with songs like Better Not Wake the Baby, Easy Come, Easy Go. But hands down, my favorite song of the Decemberists, it's been my favorite song since I first discovered them, and it still is my favorite song. And I was lucky enough that they did perform it live when I saw it, so I have an entire recording of the whole 4-minute long song, and that is a song called Here I Dreamt I Was an Architect. And it's basically just such, it's a very unique sounding song to me because the melody is just so good and the lyrics are so interesting, and it's just really good. I mean, if you're going to listen to any song by the Decemberists, that one's my personal fave. But honestly, so many songs are good, and The Crane Wife is a fantastic album. Probably the best one start to finish. If you're looking to get into the Decemberists, I would start with that one, especially the actual Crane Wife 1 and 2 song. Very good. It's good stuff. Alright guys, so that was my list of my favorite bands. Again, I tried to be as selective as possible for bands that like I can put on at any time and I'll enjoy listening to them, or bands that I have the CDs in my car that I kind of continuously keep in my car because I'm always going back to them, that kind of thing. But these are definitely all bands that I would love to see live. Some of them I have, some of them I never will see live, like in the cases of, you know, the Eagles and the Beatles where they have deceased members. But I'm still holding out for Seeing of Monsters and Men in Churches because I still think it's gonna happen. convinced I'll make it happen. But anyway, if these are bands that you guys have listened to and if you have thoughts on them, I would love to know them. If they're bands that you're interested in, I really, really recommend checking them out. They're some of my favorite bands, or if you want to recommend me your favorite bands, I would love to hear it, and I'll see you guys soon with another video. Bye!